Arthur counted the $100 bills like someone counting the seconds left in his life. At 72, the man who had built real estate empires and bent the stock market to his will discovered that money is a terrible companion for someone who fears the silence of an empty mansion. The marble walls of his estate in Petropolis didn't echo laughter, only the metallic sound of his own footsteps. He had everything, but Arthur's everything was a vast collection of dead things. It was on an afternoon of dense fog that he saw her for the first time. It wasn't at a charity event or a gala dinner, but in the small garden of the convent neighboring his estate, a place he had ignored for decades. She was kneeling, her hands dirty with soil, tending to white lilies under the light rain. The gray habit hid her body, but Sister Clara's face seemed sculpted in an era when beauty was still sacred. The image of that young woman, who had renounced the world while he had spent his life trying to buy it, caused a short circuit in Arthur's mind. How could someone be so happy possessing nothing, while he was so miserable possessing everything? Curiosity turned into interest, and interest, in less than a month, became a silent obsession. Arthur began attending morning mass at the convent chapel. He, a staunch atheist who had always seen religion as a crutch for the weak, now knelt in the front pew just to smell the scent of incense that mingled with Clara's presence. She noticed. Clara had a gaze that seemed to pierce Arthur's defenses, a mixture of pity and something that he, in his emotional blindness, interpreted as a calling. The first dialogue between the two wasn't about God. It was about finitude. "You seem to carry the weight of a world you cannot take with you," she said, in a voice so soft that Arthur felt as if his defenses were melting. In that moment, the millionaire decided that he didn't want just the salvation of his soul. He wanted the proximity of that purity. What Arthur didn't know, and what his nose for business failed to detect, was that the convent was going through a terminal financial crisis. And more importantly, he didn't know that, in the back of the sacristy, Sister Clara shared secrets that went far beyond prayers with the man responsible for administering the souls of that parish. While Arthur planned how to use his fortune to win the nun's heart, a much older and crueler plan was already in motion in the shadows of the confessional. The old wolf of business was about to enter a territory where the rules were not dictated by contracts, but by deadly sins. The vulnerability of a powerful man is a valuable commodity, and Father Matteo knew exactly how to price it. Matteo wasn't the type of cleric who got lost in complex theologies. He was a strategist of souls, with a charisma that disarmed skeptics and a voice that sounded like divine judgment. When Arthur began pouring astronomical donations into the convent to impress Clara, Matteo realized he wasn't facing a believer, but an open gold mine. The plan was executed with surgical precision. Clara, under Matteo's guidance, began to allow Arthur to get closer. She spoke of projects of light, orphanages that needed renovations, and hospitals that only existed on paper. Every time Arthur signed a six-figure check, he received in return a soft touch on the hand or a look of gratitude from Clara that made him feel 30 years younger. The millionaire, who had always prided himself on his cold logic, was now intoxicated by a belated hope for redemption and love. Matteo entered the scene as the spiritual mediator. He invited Arthur to private dinners at the parish house, where expensive wines, financed by Arthur himself, were served while they discussed material detachment. The priest told Arthur that money was a dense energy that prevented his spiritual ascension and, consequently, prevented him from being truly attuned to someone as pure as Clara. "To touch the divine, Arthur, you need to let go of earthly tethers," Matteo whispered between sips of wine. The manipulation was psychological. They made Arthur believe that Clara was considering leaving her vows, but that her conscience prevented her from abandoning the social work that depended on funds she did not possess. Arthur then began to liquidate assets. He sold stocks, divested stakes in companies, and transferred properties to funds managed by Matteo, believing he was building a charitable legacy that would cleanse his past and guarantee his future alongside the woman he loved. He didn't realize he was transferring the blood of his empire into the hands of two predators who laughed in secret under the protection of the altar. Arthur's isolation was total. He distanced himself from lawyers, accountants, and the few friends he still had, convinced that they were worldly beings who did not understand his new journey. The mansion, once full of art, began to be emptied. Money flowed like a river toward the abyss, and Arthur, in the center of it all, felt more alive than ever, without noticing that the lamb was being prepared for the final blow. The trap was set. Matteo and Clara already had the necessary documents, signatures gathered in moments of religious euphoria, and the blind trust of a man who thought he was buying heaven, when, in fact, he was only financing the hell that was about to crash down on his head. A confianca e o ultimo viu che cai antes de tragedia. No og de sua eluseo, Arthur Janeo via penis uma frera em Clara, via sua ultima chance de neo mora sozinho. Ele havia transferido o equivalent o 80% de SCU patrimonio para contas internacionais, supostamente destinadas uma fundação de auxilio humanitario sediada na Europa, tudo sob a curadoria do Padre Matteo. O plano final era simples nakabika de Arthur. Clara renunciaria aos votos, afundiceo estaria solida eles viverium o resto de sus dias uma villa na Toscana, lunge do julgamento do mundo. O golpe de misericordia comico uma noite de tempestade, a mesma atmosfera que envolveu o primeiro encontro dos dois. Arthur chegou ao convento sem avisar, carregando uma joia que havia pertencido a sua mãe, anel de diamantes que ele pretendia entregar a Clara como o símbolo do fim de vida religiosa dela e o início de uma vida com ele. Ao entrar pelos fundos, usando a chave que Mateo lhe dera para visitas de oração, o silencio do claustro parecia mais pesado que o normal. Ele neo a encontro na capela, neo a encontro no jardim, seguindo o som de voces abafadas e uma risada que ele nunca tinha ouvido, uma risada carregada de escarnio e luxúria. Arthur caminhou a sacristia. A porta estava intribata. O que ele viu destruiu o palco que restava de sua sanidade. Ali, sobre os paramentos sagrados e rodeados por garrafas de champanhe das quais ele mesmo pagara, estavam Clara e Mateo. Neo havia ritué, neo havia santidade, havia apenas o entrelacer de dois amantes que celebravam a maior vitória de suas carreiras criminosas. Clara neo usava o habito, vestia roupas de grife compradas com o dinheiro de Arthur. Mateo, como o colorinho clerical jogado no chão, conferia laptop as transferências bancárias confirmadas. Ele mais estúpido do que eu imaginai, diz Clara, enquanto beijava o pescoço de Mateo. Ele realmente achou que eu trocaria a liberdade pelo peso de cuidar de velho decrépito. Arthur sentiu o chão summer. O anel de diamantes escapou de seus dedos tremulos, batendo no mármore com estilo seco. O samico como tyro. Os dois amantes congelaram e olharam para a porta. Neo houve pedido de desculpas. Neo houve remorso. Mateo apenas se levantou, agito a camisa e olhou para Arthur com uma frigia que nenhum demonio seria capaz de emular. O sacrifício foi cito Arthur, disse o padre com sorriso cínico. Você queria a redenção através do desapigo. Pois bem, agora você está oficialmente desapegado de tudo. Naquela noite, Arthur foi expulso de sua própria vida. E ao tentar conquistar as transferências na manhã seguinte, descobriu que o dinheiro já havia passado por quatro paraísos fiscais diferentes. Ele era estranho seu próprio imperio, homem sem passes, sem amor e, o pai de tudo, sem o direito de gritar por justiça, pois cada centavo havia sido doado de livre e espontânea vontade. The fall of a giant makes no sound when he falls into the void. In less than a week, Arthur's lawyers confirmed what he already knew in the depths of his shattered soul. The money trail had evaporated. The accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands were empty. The properties, transferred to shell companies controlled by Mateo, were sold at market prices to phantom buyers in a matter of hours. A lifetime's empire was dissolved with the same ease with which one blows out a candle. Arthur tried the police, but the response was a legal punch to the gut. He had signed every document. He had notarized every donation. He had declared, under the pretext of faith, that he was fully aware of his actions. To the legal world, he wasn't a victim of fraud. He was just an eccentric old man who had decided to be too generous before going mad. Evicted from his own mansion, Arthur watched the moving trucks taking away the furniture he had chosen with such pride. He ended his days in a small boarding house room in downtown Rio de Janeiro, a place where the smell of mold replaced the scent of incense that had led him to ruin. He spent his afternoons sitting on a park bench, watching people pass by, searching every female face for the trace of a sanctity that he now knew to be the face of evil. Meanwhile, miles away, at a luxury resort on the French Riviera, a couple drew attention for their elegance and joy. She, a woman of stunning beauty who now went by the name Claire. He, a discreet investor named Matthew. There were no cassocks, no habits, and the only prayer they offered was a daily toast to the fortune they had inherited from the old sinner in Brazil. They lived paradise on earth, built with the bricks of someone else's deception. Divine justice, if it exists at all, seemed to have taken a vacation. Clara and Mateo were never found by Interpol, for the perfect crime leaves no trail of blood, only signed papers. Arthur died 2 years later, not of old age, but of a sadness that no medicine or prayer could cure. In his pocket, they found only a small wooden rosary that he had stolen from the convent on the night of the betrayal. The millionaire who wanted to buy heaven ended up discovering that hell is a place right here on earth, often disguised with the veil of purity and the collar of faith. Arthur's story became an urban legend in financial circles. The man who lost everything for a kiss that was never about love, and for a salvation that cost every penny of his soul.